that program in a little while, but I'm very pleased to introduce Angela Leigh Tucker. Angela has come to Washington the last 3 years with a group of us for Congressional Brain Injury Awareness Day. So she's going to talk a little bit about her experiences.
I was invited today to speak about my advocacy in Washington, D.C. at this year's National Brain Injury Awareness Day. I've created a one-page summary, so don't worry about taking notes. I've got it all for you on that table following this discussion. My favorite definition of advocacy comes from Malcolm Payne. Advocacy is the act of speaking in support of human concerns or needs. Where people have their own voice, advocacy means speaking, making sure they're heard. Where they have difficulty speaking, it means providing help. Where they have no voice, it means speaking for them. Many of us have had the blessings of advocates in our lives, and I want to thank those advocates who are in this room right now. There are a lot of them. Give a little bit more. Mine was my stepmother, Mary Wall. She's a nurse practitioner in North Carolina who's very well respected in the medical community. I called once to get an MRI scheduled, and I was put on a 3-week wait list. Mary Wall called later that night, and the exam was scheduled the next day. Mary Wall, who I lovingly refer to as my bonus mom, helped me grow strong enough to return to New York City, and she herself was strong enough to let me go. My advocate, Mary Wall, is one of the main reasons I'm standing before you today. I pray this national report will inspire you, survivors, caregivers, and professionals, to advocate locally. We have experienced something traumatic, we all have. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this conference. But what we have in common is our tragic stories. And here is mine. I've been a part of this family since July 2008, when I was in a crash that changed my life. My husband and I were leaving a Yankees baseball game when the accident occurred. We were hit by an 18-wheeler that came across a concrete divide. 6 weeks later, I awoke at Westchester Medical and learned my husband was dead. We would have celebrated our 1-year wedding anniversary while I was in coma. I was transferred to Helen Hayes Hospital. 2 months later, I was discharged and moved to North Carolina to live with my father. I continued to receive outpatient therapy at Care Partners in Asheville. In addition to the TBI, physical injuries were healing too. A broken C1 vertebrae, 3 broken ribs, and a broken scapula, fractured scapula. The following spring, I represented North Carolina in my first National Brain Injury Awareness Day. It was only 6 months later, and I was still wearing a hard neck collar and needed help to get dressed. My father drove us to D.C. This friend, Karen, who works for the Brain Injury Association of North Carolina, helped dress me and bring me. She works for the Brain Injury Association of North Carolina and is a certified brain injury specialist and resource coordinator. Karen is also a personal caregiver for her son, who has a TBI. That initial energy is why I continue to advocate today. I am blessed to have introduced awareness of this annual event to many members of my New York City support group. With news that I shared, our potential delegation grew from 1 or 2 New Yorkers to a formidable force of 10 eager advocates. It was exhilarating to be a part of this purpose-driven troop on Capitol Hill for the past 3 years. Prior to the accident, I often traveled for my job. Now traveling with as a TBI survivor is challenging. For example, when I left for DC this year, I left all of my travel documents in this folder at home in my apartment. When I got to Penn Station and realized I needed to return to my apartment, the pressure to get there and back in time was enormous. I'm sure y'all can relate. In order to prevent this scenario in the future, I developed a new strategy. I will leave all important travel documents on the floor in front of my door so they won't be left behind again. My friend Liz York tells me that I demonstrate resiliency by learning from the TBI difficulties and making the necessary adjustments. You can bet this folder was left in front of my door to get to Albany. And actually it's been in front of the door upstairs for a long while. Giving this speech is a testament of how far I've come, given the severity of the injuries. This is an opportunity to practice what I've learned at Rusk Institute of Rehabilitation Medicine. This is the first speech I've given since the injury. Another strategy I'm using is Liz York is sitting right there, and she's giving me cues. Speak up, slow down, eye contact. So if you see her doing any of this, don't get distracted. Now, let me tell you about the conference, and I invite you to join us. The National Brain Injury Awareness Day provides an opportunity for people to learn about research, prevention, rehabilitation, and community services. We met with political leaders who are potential advocates of our community. We raised awareness of the many ways TBI visibly and invisibly impacts members of our community and society at large. The Honest Facts Coordinator, Maggie Ornstein, led Manhattan chapter members to DC. She's our support group leader. She organized meetings and coordinated the day's activities. She organized a group introduction and provided maps so that our group felt oriented in DC. Maggie showed persistence to visit all of the offices, even those who turned down her appointment. She successfully scheduled constituent appointments with Senators Gillibrand and Schumer, Representatives Crowley, Velasquez, Nadler, Rangel, and Maloney. There are 29 representatives from New York's U.S. House of Representatives. Our group was only able to meet with 5 of them. In this room, we can be the voice of brain injury for those other 24. We don't have to travel to DC to have our voices heard. I invite you to consider what you can do to help. There was someone who asked about how to find a representative. Who was that? I'm going to show you. Ma'am, can you tell me your zip code?
1003.
1003 what?
38.
38. There's a zip code locator at house.gov. And hopefully this works. And you type in your zip code, and out pops possible representatives, because you're in a big district. It's Velasquez, who we met with in DC this year, and Nadler, who we also met with in DC this year. So this website is very, very helpful to find who your representatives are. It provides a local phone number, their local address, so you have a very excellent resource to be able to identify who is your representative in your area. And in New York, there are a lot.
Can you give us the website again?
It's house.gov, and don't worry, it's included on the handout. house.gov/find representative. So it's on the handout. Pardon? Thank you for being members of your local BIANYS chapter. Another way to advocate is to be active in your chapter and make calls or write letters. One step I'm taking towards locally advocating is writing representatives I met with in DC. I'm asking for their support as my beloved New York City chapter support group is currently displaced and searching for a permanent new home. If writing is not your strength, perhaps team up with someone who can help write your words with you. I'm also organizing that bridge walk because of that genius. And thank you for the idea. And we're going to be walking across Brooklyn Bridge soon, fundraiser. I personally attended 2 of the DC appointments, and it was rewarding to learn that Senator Gillibrand, who is a friend of Gabby Gifford, employs 2 veterans who have TBIs. One is her staff assistant, Selvin Wyatt, who coincidentally led us into the meeting. When I heard he had a TBI, I invited him to join us. He appreciated being able to share his personal testimony. Another advocate of our community could be Representative Rangel. Charlie Rangel is the U.S. representative for New York's 13th Congressional District, where Manhattan Group member Timothy Cruz and I live. We met with Rangel's legislative director, Reba Raffelli. At the conclusion of our meeting, we asked if he'd like to be a member of the Congressional Brain Injury Task Force. She said, as a veteran himself, Charlie feels strongly about supporting veterans in whatever way he can. BIANYS is following up with his office now. We invited the offices of Gillibrand and Rangel to the reception. Gillibrand's assistant, Selvin, wore his Purple Heart to the reception, and I was very impressed. At this year's Brain Injury Awareness Fair, I met my close friend Karen from BIANYS, who brought me the first year. The fair is designed to bring people together. Federal and national organizations can network among state peers and leaders. This year's Congressional Briefing had diverse speakers. There were 6. Let me introduce them. Firstly, and somebody asked this during Dr. Flanagan's speech yesterday, so here's an answer. A doctor from BHR Pharma is leading a promising development. Dr. Gerritsen Vanderhoek is developing a progesterone infusion agent called BHR-100. This drug is administered by IVs for TBIs as a neuroprotective agent within 24 hours of injury. BHR Pharma announced in April its 1,000th patient enrolled in its clinical trial. Not yet FDA approved, it's been fast-tracked because of its study results. Second, the National Director of Project ECHO introduced the VA's new model for medical education that provides care to veterans regardless of where they live. The third panel member was the National Policy Director of the Wounded Warrior Project. With the increase of PTSD and TBI, he shared this alarming number, that 1 out of every 5 soldiers commits suicide. I also learned that there are 22 active veterans or veterans or active duty soldiers who kill themselves each day. The NFL's president of public affairs was there. Honestly, I don't recall what he said. But I was surprised that he was invited to speak on this panel. The YMCA's Director of Health Partnerships spoke about their Moving for Better Balance, which is teaching Tai Chi to older adults as part of a falls prevention program. Lastly, the Director of Policy for Center of Disease Control reported on a program called Heads Up. Heads Up is designed for high school coaches. I'm trying to remember who asked the question. A little bit. Heads Up is designed for high school coaches. Director Sarah Patterson shared that the CDC has trained 350,000 athletic school coaches through the program. It educates people about concussion symptoms and danger signs, and how to respond if a concussion occurs. I was shocked when she shared new data that there are 3.5 million new brain injuries in the U.S. annually. 3.5 million brain injuries new a year. This staggering figure includes concussions. I'm grateful Lori Rippin clarified this alarming number during the Q&A. The presence and commitment of these high-profile 6 professionals underscores the continued need for improved awareness. They are providing information about new resources which are helpful to recovery within our community. Another perk of attending the conference was meeting and building relationships with local survivors and professionals. I enjoyed meeting Dr. Christine Kingsley, who works at N.Y.S, Lincoln, where I still receive weekly cognitive remediation therapy. There are some in Congress who are doing extraordinary work for the brain injured community. Congressman Pascal is one of them. He assisted a soldier who sustained a TBI in Iraq. This soldier received a Purple Heart. In appreciation, he gave his well-earned Purple Heart to Congressman Pascal for the work done on behalf of our community. At the reception I attended, the congressman returned the Purple Heart back to the injured veteran. It should be noted that Maggie Ornstein deserves a special thank you from our community. A very significant part of our success was thanks to her presence. Maggie demonstrated strong personal commitment by self-funding for this year's trip. BIANYS should make every effort to assure Maggie or another representative attends future National Brain Injury Awareness Days on behalf of the Brain Injury Association of New York State. Remember, you can make a local phone call, send an email, or write a letter. By sharing your stories locally, you can make as much of an impact as our meetings did in D.C. I practiced this speech for my friend Karen from BIANYS last night, and I thanked her for birthing this advocate within me. Karen expressed that this may be the catalyst to help states work more collaboratively. I pray this will encourage state brain injury associations to help advocate for each other. I met Angie Fico, a survivor from Pennsylvania, in D.C. this year. Angie invited me. She received a generous scholarship for herself and a friend to attend the Brain Injury Association of Pennsylvania annual conference on June 24th and 25th in Lancaster. I'm grateful she invited me to join her in a few weeks. Thanks to my camera gal, Anne Marie, I'd like to share a bonus thank you to my former neighbor and current conference roommate, Liz York. This presentation would not have been as clear, organized, or inspired without your help. And thank you all. I know it's difficult to maintain attention, and I appreciate yours for so long.
I was reminded, I didn't forget, but I should have said that the reason I started organizing the trips, Brain Injury Association has gone to Washington for many years, but Angela and the support group said, hey, I went to Washington, and who from our group is going? You know, and 5 people raised their hands and said they wanted to go, so that was really the impetus for the New York City group.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for all the work you've done. I now would like to introduce